Hi, everybody. This is DogmanCams.com, and I'm your host, John Bell. And tonight we've got an exciting show for you where we've got our panel discussion group back, and we're going to be discussing the super hot topic that everybody has a different side on the very famous, or the most famous, probably, arguably, dogman encounter, which is the LBL, the land between the lakes. So that's what we're going to be discussing this evening. Also, there was a lot of drama that happened in the last show about me doing the panel and who these people are that I brought on. So I just want to clarify that to any of the audience that might be interested in that at all. Hunter, who's going to be on your screen to the far right, he and I served in the same military unit together, different battalions, but same unit. And he has sent me his DD-214, and I've read his military history on there. And for those that are in the military, you understand what a DD-214 is. Your personal file records outside of your medical records. That tells what you were involved in the military, what accolades you might have won, medals, et cetera, schools you went to, and things of this nature, units you served in, et cetera, time, grade, those sort of things. Hunter has sent me his private and personal DD-214 without me requesting it, and I greatly appreciate that from him. He's also sent me other personal verifications of his time spent in the military, including some specific schools that he was involved in the military that military people would recognize. And so I can fully say I vouch for Hunter that this is the case. And it's enough for me to bring him on the show. Another thing is, he and I have been friends for a while, and he has done ferocious research in a lot of areas. And a lot of people that are naysayers or have different opinions haven't done as much research as he has in specific areas. And that's why I invited him on the show. He also brought his friend to the table, all right, TJ Neely. TJ Neely has a book out that he's written on dogmen and the revelation, the human hominid connection, okay, which I highly recommend you check it out. My friend Jeff on his show said that it's a must-read book and spoke very highly of him, which I was grateful for. He also has a background in the military and special operations. Both of these men have experience in high-level brass and military operations and special operations, and that makes them have a unique perspective on some of the topics that we talk about, like what we did in the previous show, and hopefully it'll lend to some of the stuff we talk about tonight. And their analytical skills and research plays right into the study and research of things like the LBL and trying to figure out, what grounds we're on with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Hunter's working on his book right now over some of the topics we've discussed, and TJ has his book completed. And so that gives me enough that I feel comfortable bringing them in. No one here claims to be an absolute expert on anything. I'm not an expert, all right? I'm just a person, a normal, everyday guy, just trying to get the truth out there like everybody else and to try and arrive at the truth, all right? And I don't take anything that anyone says and just discard it. I try to take in everything, or witness for that matter, okay? No matter how crazy it sounds, all right? Some people have really had problems with some of the guests I've had on. I don't care at all. I'm not saying that they're 100% legitimate, but they were entertaining. I like what they had to say, and I like what they had to say on the subject of Dogman, so I brought them on. That doesn't mean I fully verify them. That doesn't mean that I fully believe everything that they had to say, or that I swear before Almighty God and country that everything they say is true or the person is valid. That's not my job. My job is to try to bring on people to get to the truth, and the best way we have with what we're given. And as Hunter brings up, it's very important on this subject to understand the fact that we're dealing with cold cases, all right? And when you're dealing with cryptids, it's not like a normal police investigation. I was a police officer, okay? I was a state trooper, all right? You can't approach these cases like you would a normal murder case. It doesn't work that way. And we don't have tangible evidence or physical evidence, all right, that most times that we have to really go off of. And these are cold cases, meaning that they happened a long time ago and we don't have a lot of evidence, and we're piecing together a lot of hearsay, just from what different people say. And so we're trying to do the best we can of meshing that together and then come to a conclusion. Well, we believe for various reasons and facts that this sounds more reasonable and this sounds less reasonable, but at the end of the day, I can't say either way. We're just trying to do the best we can, so after that long speech, I'd like to introduce TJ. Why don't you come on and give people a brief bio on yourself, and then we'll bring on Hunter, and then after that we'll get into the LBL.
Yeah, that was a great lead in. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. I did a full 20 years active duty military. Retired as an Army officer. 8 of those years was in special operations. So I was exposed to a whole lot and did a whole lot. I used to parachute into work. That's how I used to get to work sometimes. So it was high adventure is what I say. But what we're doing here in the cryptid world, as far as our research, this is as a hobby. This is as a pure interest, a desire to want to know more about something that we're told that does not exist. And this all began for me back in 1984 when I came across the 9-foot 4-inch Bigfoot in the middle of the Wenatchee Forest. And ever since then, I have been out in the woods, putting myself out there, seeing what else I can see and discover. And I've seen a lot. I've seen the big 3. And my stories are out there, and this is not about making any money. I mean, like I told you, shared with you, John, I said, if you know anything about Amazon, putting a book out on Amazon, that sucks up all of the profits right there. I make about $1.50 per book. So this is about getting the information out to the people who deserve to know the truth and what else is out there, because there's a good chance if you like to hike, camp, hunt, fish, what have you, you're going to run into one of these things out there sooner or later, and you need to be aware of what you can do to help protect yourself. And also, if you know what's out there and then you see one, it goes a little bit easier on you psychologically when you actually, come in contact with something that we are told does not exist. So basically, this whole effort here is for the benefit of the people. And we don't get paid for this. We aren't told to get on your show and do this. We are doing this just out of love for the topic and because this is all about information sharing. So that's it in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Hunter?
Well, I can't do either one of those. So I'll be real brief. Retired military, 39 years in the Army, retired as senior leader, 6 years of combat. And, everything that TJ and John covered pretty much covers it. So I got a lot of cool experiences and stories. Not all of them are cryptid, and I'm not going to bore you with them here, but it's good to be back, and thanks for all the folks that attended last week. Hopefully it was valuable as we go forward. I think you're going to find that it leads into what we're going to discuss tonight with the LBL. So thanks, John.
Yeah, and also I got a lot of heat last time for talking about Victor so much and not having Jeff on the show. So I talked to Jeff, and he said that when he can, he's super, super busy right now. But when he can, he's going to come on the show, and we're going to do a show with me and him just talking about that. So hopefully that'll satisfy some people that was upset. And yeah, it would have been great to have him on. He's very busy right now. I did let him know that I was doing the show, that I was planning to do the show about his witness, et cetera, et cetera. But that should be coming in the hopefully relatively near future. But that said, the topic for tonight is the LBL, the land between the lakes. This is the hottest topic right now. And for those of you who might not understand why, it's because someone has come forward claiming to be going by the name of Roger, who is claiming that they were actually a child and an eyewitness that was there the night that this took place, and is given more information about the story. So that's hit the community like wildfire. And several shows, several cryptid shows have been doing shows on this. Like Jeff did a show. I don't think he took it from a different direction, but he did a show recently on the LBL. Josh Turner's done a show on the LBL, and we appreciate all that. And any cryptid encounter show that's discussing the topic right now. Looks like we lost Hunter. He's coming back. So it's the hot topic, and we want to feed the audience, and we hopefully have some information to share and contribute to the story, and looking at different things that have been said by different people from different angles of the story, and that's basically what we're going to be getting into. So, Hunter, why don't you lead us off with that?
Hey, thanks, John. Yeah, just as a reminder for you guys, I was actually working on writing a story about the LBL by basically combining the known stories we had out there into one, let's say, longer story. And I had just written up a draft, and I'd send it to TJ for peer review, so see if I'd missed anything or if what he thought my draft was going to be acceptable. And I, showed him my source material, which at the time was Kuhn Bo's account, which he gave on Bigfoot Outlaw Radio, and also Jan Thompson's account, and she was the first one to break the story, a few years ago, before anyone else. And then Victor's account, and Victor had covered it several times on Jeff's channel. And so combining those three stories together made for a much clearer picture of what we think may have happened at the LBL. Now, granted, there's no with the exception of Roger, who just came forward, there's no living witnesses, there's no evidence, so I'm going to read through a couple of documents to you that establish, the baseline for what I was trying to get to. And the goal was to put this story in a book. So that's kind of, it just so happened while I'm doing this, Roger comes on the scene and gives us a whole bunch of new material. So I had to kind of start rewriting the story about the LBL, but now we have a cradle to grave, no pun intended, kind of story that didn't exist before. We had three different stories looking through three different lenses. Some of them covered some of the same material, some doesn't. But when I go through this, you'll see how I kind of logically break this down. So give me a second. I'm going to read through how we start this whole thing. And so in the LBL investigative overview, I kind of laid out some things. So this refers to the 1982 excuse me, Land Between the Lakes family murders. And there's a bunch of sources I use. So number one, witness to the LBL attack comes forward. Beast of LBL, that came from the Cryptid Studies Institute, and that's enclosure 1. So Saxon Warlord sent out an email. If you guys want access to this material, I want to give it to you. So I'm not holding anything back. I'm very transparent with this, and I think the more people that look at it, the more input I can get, and I think we can have something that's a lot more complete than what I would do myself. So if you guys want to access the material, send an email to saxonwarlord2@gmail.com. Tell them, give me your name and your email address. I'll give you access to the shared drive, and you can download everything you want. And there's like 15 documents in there. So anyway, that's I posted that a little while ago. So if you reach out when I get done, I'll make sure that you guys have access to it. And you can follow along or read it at your leisure. Either way, you can kind of see where I'm coming from as I'm piecing this together. So that was number one. That was the witness to the LBL, and that was the Cryptid Studies Institute. That's enclosure 1. The Dogman of LBL, Bigfoot Outlaw Radio, episode 40, part 3, and that came from Bigfoot Outlaw Radio. That's enclosure 2, and that's Kuhn Bo's story. Enclosure number 3 was the LBL family murders by Jan Thompson. Enclosure number 4 was Dogman Victor shares his father's and his similar hunts. And that's from, Dogman Encounters with Jeff Naldani. That's enclosure 4. Enclosure 5, that's Victor LBL references. And so he's made several references about the LBL on his time on Jeff's show. So I dedicated a whole document to that has all the captured comments and questions he's answered with regard to LBL. You can quickly go to him. There's links. You can go right to the video. And I did the transcripts because you can easily do a word search and find the passage you're looking for or the word you're looking for to see what was actually said. Number 6, moon phases for 7 April 1982. That's enclosure number 6, and you'll see that we had a full moon. Enclosure number 7 is the weather report for 7 April 1982, and you'll find that at 6 p.m. it was 40 degrees. Winds are from the northeast at, I think, 12 to 15 miles an hour. And the LBL, enclosure number 8 is the LBL maps and reference material. So there's maps of the LBL and reference material that I'll reference throughout my analysis. So you guys can go to it and you can kind of look and see in terms of measurements, how far it is from one place to the other, things of that nature. Enclosure number 9 is the motorhome evidence. So I got pictures of the motorhome that Rogers said that he had used, the family had used, for this trip. And I got some other motorhome evidence from either that or a different crime scene at the LBL. Enclosure number 10 is the werewolf. That'll show pictures of a decapitated werewolf that's actually in a museum in London or in England. Enclosure number 11 is the timeline. Now it's a waterfall chart that I started, and that needs a lot of work. And so that is a draft, and by no means is that complete. And that would require some Q&A with Roger to kind of straighten some things out. Number 12 is military reference material. So that's only important because in Roger's testimony, he mentioned seeing some types of unmarked military type vehicles and some uniforms that had no badges or markings whatsoever. And so we talk a little bit about that in that. Number 13, other strange hominid cryptids. All right, so I've heard people in chats and other places talk about, well, I think it was a Gugway, or I think it was whatever. And so when you look at the description and the origins of these 3 creatures that were mentioned in chats, you'll find that they don't come anywhere close to what this particular creature is. And so those are pulled out. Those have been researched hard, and they're actually in a cryptid encyclopedia. Number 14 is Bigfoot Encounters, episode 315. That has, I stuck that in there. That happens to, it's from Vic's channel. That tells a story about an encounter at Fort Polk, Louisiana in 1980, and that's the earliest reference I could find about the Men in Black, or in this particular case, Victor's organization. And there's a lot of revealing.
That was a great story, by the way.
Yeah, it was. And the last reference I have is number 15, Dogman, a Connecticut connection and update in Taylor, Mississippi. Now, that's only relevant because that's another piece of evidence I had that gives Victor credibility, because he showed up at Luke's farm after a dog man had killed his grandfather. And when Luke's father and friends went to track this dog man a couple of days later after the funeral, they found along the way a lot of empty bullet casings, blood everywhere, and the creatures had been removed. They didn't pursue it. They got a little nervous when they started seeing all this carnage that they think happened. And then Victor tells his part of the story. Yeah, we found, a Bigfoot that was in bad shape that we offered aid to, and we continued to hunt, and we tracked and killed 8 dogmen. One of them had a unique bullet hole in it that wasn't from us, which was from his grandfather, who was later killed by this creature. anyway, it's a
Right.
good read.
Yeah, definitely. That's a fantastic story from Jeff's show. But what happened here is the Bigfoot was actually protecting him, the Luke, right, from a dogman attack. So and the Bigfoot was critically injured and almost died from the encounter. So again, there was some collaboration. But go ahead.
So, John, I meant to include that last week and forgot. But anyway, it's in there now for those people that want to read that. Or, the link is there too to go right to Jeff's channel and see that. So the purpose of this was try to get a peer review over some of the analysis I've done and generate some more discussion and try to get a little sharper pencil to some of the areas that I point out. So generally speaking, the story of the 1982 family murders in the LBL is likely the best known cryptid story besides the Patterson film. This story has persisted for many years in various forms without anyone producing any evidence to support this claim. However, as in nearly all cryptid stories, real evidence is nearly absent in every case. And ironically, I just began the peer review when Roger's story came out, when the Cryptids Studies Institute. And so that caused me to take another look at this, and I found his story to be very plausible. I found him to be, I believe, a story. Now there's some things that need to be untangled, and it's about asking the right. And right now, I think adding him to the other three sources we have a more complete story. So I break this up into phases, which I'm going to get into. But I'm going to treat his story like it's true, just like I'm going to treat the other stories like they're true. And there'll be pieces that we won't be able to conclude that might be plausible, or we can't deconflict, with other sources. And so we'll have to handle those differently. But for the most part, these stories all fit together. They complement each other more than they conflict with each other. You also find that the word fact should be avoided in this conversation, as the only fact is we don't have any evidence. Only testimony about a tragedy that is nearly 40 years old. And the four stories included in this analysis are on equal footing at this point, as none could be proven at this time. So the goal here was to, one, not let this family tragedy be forgotten, expose the dangers these creatures pose to humans, and to expose the humans who continue to cover up these tragedies at our expense. Piece together as complete a story as possible with what we have and what is both plausible and possible from the four prevailing stories that currently exist. For truth seekers, this might be as close to a more complete truth that we can get to. However, we will be closer to that goal with this effort than where we were before. So before, we have now four separate stories that you have to read four different stories, and no one deconflicts anything for you because it's going to take, a monumental amount of analysis and research to try and deconflict some of this stuff. And some just won't be able to be deconflicted. So I really want to encourage everyone that wants to contribute or discuss this to jump on board. I could use your help. The end state is to try to draft up a complete story of the LBL for peer review, and then publish this story as part of a cryptids book. Or if John wants to have it here, that's fine too. So having said that, the sources, I've listened to numerous accounts on this event, and the prevailing accounts come from Jan Thompson, which is enclosure 3, Coonbo Baker, which is enclosure 2, and they're the most popular accounts available publicly. In the last year, 2 other accounts have come forward, one from Federal Agent Victor Johnson from Jeff's channel. That's enclosure 4. And the recently released account of the only previously unconfirmed survivor of the 1982 family murders, that's Roger. I'm not aware of any other accounts that are not derivatives of either Jan or Coonbo's account of this event. So if you guys got something that you're holding back on me, by all means, I'm happy to include it in here, because I just want to get to the truth like many people. So it's not like I'm married to this particular group of stories I have right now. I think they're significant, but by all means, that there's others that they could add to this. And I certainly don't want to slight anyone who has a differing account of the story, and we'd be pleased to add other accounts that are unique to our analysis. So, but bear in mind, these are 4 different individuals looking at this event through 4 different lenses. All 4 had different roles and responsibilities in this event, so their stories will not all be the same. Jan's story uses source material from 2 officers who had been on the scene for a few hours after the murders. Kuhnbo's sources are from officers working at the LBL after the event, and after providing testimony in event locations, they are now silent from any further discussion on the topic, or in some cases, a lot of these sources they died over the years. They're deceased. Victor alleges he'd made several trips to the LBL over the years, but was not present during the murders. Instead, he claimed that his father and another agent, which was Walt, were the agents that hunted and killed the creature. And Victor reads comments from his father's notes on the official report. Finally, Roger was a 15-year-old boy that was with the family and witnessed some of the murders occurring. And he was present while they were occurring. So in summary, this is what we got. We have one alleged witness who was present before, during, and after the murders. Post-murders, we know he was taken away, returned briefly, and was taken away again, and he is recalling this story nearly 40 years later. Jan's sources were 2 police officers that saw the grisly aftermath of the murders before they were relieved and were replaced by federal agents. Kuhnbo's sources played various roles after the murders, but provide anecdotal and eyewitness testimony and context after the event took place. Victor provides testimony mostly related to witness statements and to the hunt itself of the creature responsible. Now, when viewing this from a 30,000-foot level, these 4 stories should complement each other, and these 4 stories represent 4 people looking through different lens, different times. And for the most part, these stories do complement each other. There's some things we'll have to deconflict. We can get into that. In the meantime, I'm going to treat these conflicts in the story by exception, some of which we'll discuss, and some we'll just have to leave alone, and they probably don't belong in the story. As far as witness source credibility, Roger sounds very credible to me and provides a lot of new information previously unknown. Parts of his testimony does match parts of Victor's testimony released in 2020. It also matches part of some of Jan and Kuhnbo's story. Could he have drawn from all those stories to create his own version? Well, possible. I feel it's unlikely. He offers up too much new material and provides details comfortably without hesitation. Now, there's some gaps in his story, as his presence during the post-murder phase was not persistent. He left the crime scene and was brought back, and then left again. Those periods will need to be explored with targeted questioning, as this implies he was not at the site.
Hey, Hunter.
Yeah.
We should mention again also, this is all going on in the mind of a 15-year-old at the time.
Absolutely.
And it was traumatic. Can you imagine experiencing something like that when you were just a kid, impressionable, vulnerable, sensitive, all of this, your entire world turned upside down, and then having to sort that out and it just kind of process it through the rest of your life to the point to where you go, hey, this thing really did happen. Maybe I need to say something about it. So to have someone like Roger come forward today and share his story I think is admirable and very amazing, knowing what the cryptid environment and society and temperament is kind of like. I mean, you can either be embraced with open arms or you could be shot in the face. You never know. But I welcome this new information, because what we're doing is putting together bits and pieces and data points and information, from many different sources, like a puzzle. We're trying to put a puzzle together so we can get a much broader perspective on what we think actually went down in the LBL that night. So this is all goodness in my mind.
No, you're right. And at some point we have to ask the question, did this even happen? Well, many people believe it did, and in this investigation, we're going to proceed as if it did. Okay, and this is a case that's not for lazy researchers. You must invest the time, energy, and a lot of investigative work in search of leads, qualifying sources, testing credibility, letting your analysis be tested in peer reviews. There are many before us that have done a lot with this, and so I'm not discrediting their effort at all. Now, there's going to be some distractions. Some people are kind of married to the story that they love the best, or the researcher they love the best, and those people are going to come out, and they're going to, as John had said before, they'll sling mud at us. And I can tell you it's because they're married to their own story, and not necessarily getting necessarily the truth, or it's only the truth that they believe. And so we don't have any limits on this as far as I'm concerned. So
what gets me is
I have zero interest in starting a cryptids channel, and am content helping others with their challenges in pursuing the truth. I don't get paid for this, and I have just an undying drive at exposing humans that commit crimes against humanity, mostly local and federal employees that think it's okay to hide information about dangerous creatures or beings and then cover up the tragedies that emerge. As far as the creature goes, there's no evidence to support pursuing demons or creatures conjured up in a Ouija board. This was a flesh and blood creature, and if anyone wants to pursue a paranormal thread, please do. I'm not experienced enough to investigate that, nor do I intend to introduce that method in this particular case. So when I went through all the evidence, I kind of broke it up into 4 phases. So we got pre-attack. So with pre-attack, there's only one witness or testimony that was present or describes the events leading up to the attack, and that's Roger. He's in closure 1. So if for those of you that have the information, I'm referencing enclosure 1. So after pre-attack, we have attack. Now, there's only one witness to some of the attack, but he was present for the entire attack, and that's Roger. That's actually referencing enclosure 1, 6, and 7. So we have pre-attack, we have attack, and now we have post-attack. All the sources used for this investigation discuss this portion of the event with some variations, and that'll be enclosures 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, after the post-attack, we have the creature, and that's track, hunt, and kill. There's only one source that discusses this portion of the event. So what I'm going to do next is I'll take a slight pause for John and TJ to jump in, and then we'll go into the common threads. So I've been hogging up the mic, and I'm sorry for that. So.
No, that's all right. One of the viewers was asking to show a track, so I thought I'd do that while you were talking. Hope it didn't distract you too much. But no, that's fine. Yeah, and that's the thing too with research. It's a lot to throw out like that. So, but yeah, we just try to do it the best we can. But as far as me, this was one of the first stories I heard of when I first started investigating Dogman encrypted activity. And I got to say, it was one of the stories that affected me the most, because when I heard about these children being basically slaughtered, that really boiled my blood, because and that's a large reason why I decided to do this show or pursue this direction. And that's because I think it's a duty as a police officer and prior service and stuff like that, that we do those jobs because you want to help protect people, and you want to help protect innocent people especially. And when you hear about an innocent family camping in the woods that just gets brutally slaughtered. Now, I would like to quantify that by saying that there are many dogman cases that the dogmen are passive or don't pose any threat. But there's also several cases where they pose a great threat. So We're not saying that all dogmen are evil or vicious, but some of them absolutely are. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you're puppy chow. And it really disturbs me that this innocent family was slaughtered and they had no idea that these things existed. And that's why I decided to do this channel. Also, because of a little black woman that I read a story about at one time. I'm forgetting the source now because it was so long ago. But there was a little black woman. It could have been anybody's mom or grandmother, elderly lady who was driving her car in Mississippi. She gets a flat tire. She calls the sheriff's department to come help her fix her flat, which is what we do, or they do. And when they showed up, she wasn't there. All they found was a pile of blood and a trail leading into the wood line and very large canine tracks in the blood trail. So here's an innocent elderly woman who just had a flat tire and she was killed. You have the case of the medical doctor. Was it Alabama or Georgia? I always get that confused. The medical doctor. You had a woman who was a highly, highly accredited medical doctor who was driving home one night after work down a dark road. And for some reason, she was coaxed to pull over on the side of the road because of something she saw strange. She was snatched, never seen again. Her car still found running, you know. And these are innocent people who didn't know anything that there was a threat or danger until it was too late. And who speaks for those people? Whose voice is for those people? And that's why I'm doing this show in the name of that little black woman. I don't even know her name, you know, in Mississippi, and for that medical doctor, and for the kid in Kentucky who was swiped out of his backyard, you know, and for the children, especially in the LBL. And that's what really has moved me in the direction to try and get this information out there. As crazy as it might sound to some people, and that doesn't bother me, I don't care. I believe these things are absolutely real. I've never seen one yet, knock on wood, but I don't have to see it to know that it's real. Just like I don't have to see a demon to know that demons are real, that ghosts are real. I've lived in haunted houses. I know they're real, you know. Anyway, TJ, was there anything you wanted to add to so far to what Hunter was saying?
I think this is a great effort. And like I said in the last show last Friday, John, was the truth resides in the public domain. That's where we're going to get the answers to all of our questions. And that comes about through each and every one of us sharing what we know with each other, so we can build this database. We can create the data points. We can make sense out of the unknown, and so we can move forward with all this until there is a full disclosure, until the government is put on the red carpet and they can no longer keep it a secret. So this is our effort, and we do this just for fun. This is just a hobby for me, and I've been doing this for 36, going on 37 years now. But I have to make one comment though. I was spoiled back in 1984 with my very first encounter with a very large Sasquatch, and I thought it was over for all of us in that campsite, but it wasn't. He meant us no harm whatsoever. We just happened to be in its way. It was moving, you know, down into the valley and just came across us and said, "Hey, what's going on here? Who are these guys?" Oh, just a bunch of humans, you know. And we're all snoring and sleeping. I happened to be the only guy awake that night, tending to the fire, so we didn't burn the forest down. But I tell you what, it meant us no harm. We just happened to be in its way, and it circled us. It checked us out. We made eye contact. It was counting us, and it ended up being a fantastic experience for me, because it was like, holy cow, I'm in the presence of this huge monster that we're told doesn't exist, and it didn't harm us one bit. And then it turned and disappeared, you know, down into the valley. And so my research approach was, you know what, if you go into the woods in the right frame of mind, with the right intent and everything, you know, 9 out of 10 times you're not going to have a violent encounter. You will come across these things and they're just as curious as you are, but you know, the number of stories of nonviolent encounters by far outweighs the number of violent encounters that are actually being reported. Out of all of my encounters, I had one that I actually thought I was on the menu, and a Bigfoot that I was interacting with at the time ran interference and told me to get the hell out of the woods now. And it was like, whoa. And I think it was a dog man that was coming in, but I did not see it. It was flanking really quick. I could see the bushes stuff moving. And I got a message saying, get out now. And this loud roar. And then something exploded over here and took off over there to intercept it. But I was beating feet. I was making, man, all you saw of me was smoke leaving the woods.
I see smoke now.
I'll tell you, it's amazing. I mean, I get excited just reliving this stuff. I mean, it's like crazy. It's kind of fun. You know, afterwards when you realize, like, holy cow, did I just experience this and survive it to talk about it later? And I said, you know, it is. But so, you know, there again, it's the only way guys like us can share stuff, our research and our encounters and all of this is through your show, John, which is fantastic, through Jeff's show, Lynn's show, you know, Leslie's show, all of these. This is what you guys are doing with their channels. Everybody in this realm is fantastic. And I want to thank you all for providing this platform for us, you know, the venue.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So and I really enjoy Jeff's show too. Yeah. I've loved listening to his show. Yeah. And you brought up a really good point, TJ, that I wanted to emphasize. And that was, when you had this encounter that you said there was the one time that you were in fear of, right? You heard that little voice in your head, right? And whatever anyone wants to call that, I would highly suggest and recommend to any of the listeners, if you ever are in a situation like that and you hear a little voice in your head like that, follow what it says absolutely to the exact detail. Because it's that little voice that's going to get you out alive. All right.
That's right.
So that was something that we were taught, especially in law enforcement, you know. But I call it intuition. I also call it my guardian angel. You can call it applesauce and bananas for all I care. But if you want to live, you better doggone listen to that voice, whatever you want to call it, you know. We
too have a sixth sense. And it unfortunately, I discovered that a little later in life. But if you learn to listen to that, and it's kind of primal, you can benefit from it, and it'll help save your life. I mean, even in combat situations. I mean, I've had that little voice.
What I've learned is we're all born and created psychic to some degree. That's just the way we're built. That's the way we're made. We all have intuition. The problem is some of us have it stronger than others. Some of it never learned to use it or exercise it as a skill, just like just like learning to drive a car or learning to read. It opens up an entirely different world, or becoming an airplane pilot. You know, it opens up an entire world you didn't have access to before. And it's the same with that, but we're not taught that. And I'm not talking about like tarot card reading or you know, palm reading and that sort of stuff. But there is intuition, and we are created that way to understand. If you feel like you have an encounter with a cryptid and you feel in fear, or you don't feel fear, you just feel curiosity, I say rely on that feeling, because I've noticed there's a pattern for that. And I think it's delivering a message in that pattern, you know. And lots of people have said, I heard a voice tell me, don't do this, duck here, run now, wait, don't move. You know what I mean? And listen to that voice, right? When I was a police officer, there was never a single time that I pulled a car over. There was never a time I even had to open my door before I knew in my head if I would need to call backup or not. I had a voice that told me I would need to call backup every single time. And I even tried to test it. I wouldn't call just to see what would happen. And sure enough, I had to call backup. Yeah, just every time. Or you hear that little voice that says, hey, moron, don't put your clipboard on top of the car. Because if you set it here, you're going to drive down the road and see all your reports from the week flying in the air. You know what I'm saying? But anyway.
Yeah, I do.
So, Hunter, where are we at with the breakdown of the analysis?
I'm gonna jump into that. I want to say shout out to Carol Edwards. I saw you last week. Thanks for joining again.
She's a friend of mine.
Good. So, Drew, did you get the link? I sent you the link to access the document. So if you didn't, let me know. So as we jump back into this, some of the things going through here, and I start with Roger's story. So common threads, I think, that are key to the story. Number one, Roger mentioned in his story the creature was found in the tree, not Connie, the little girl, and that the creature was found dead in the tree, actually had a piece of her sweater in its claws. So Roger admits seeing the creature in the tree. He later reveals that he was taken back to the tree and saw it with flashlights. So it tells me it was dark, and he was more than 50 feet away from it. I want to say it was 50 yards, which, would be 150 feet, if I recall correctly. Now, so Roger mentions this. The creature was found in the tree, and he saw the creature. They took him back to to that tree so he could correctly identify the creature. Now, it just so happens that a year ago, Federal Agent Victor Johnson also reported that just before my time, but it was my dad's case, it was a werewolf. It was 7'10" and weighed 450 pounds. He shot it out of the very tree that it took that little girl up and then hung her on the limbs. And he had to climb up the tree and cut the limbs so the werewolf would fall to the ground. Now, this particular part of the story is not referenced by Jan or Kuhnbo. So you got that particular thread is confirmed by Victor. Roger said he saw it in the tree. Victor said his dad shot it in the tree and then had to climb the tree and cut the limb to get the werewolf out of the tree. So the second thread that I found that Roger mentions could also be referenced. He mentions the murders was over fairly quick, meaning the attack was over very quickly. Levi fired a 20 gauge shotgun at the creature. Roger fired a 410 shotgun at the creature. Well, last year, Victor confirmed on 19 November, he reads from his father's case notes on the investigation. And this was the other nameless agent mentioned by Roger that accompanied Walt. Witness statements from nearby campers. There were two families that heard the commotion. It sounded like there was an explosion, and that would be one of the shotguns. There was screaming. You could hear metal ripping, they said, and both of the men from the other families jumped out of their campers to see what they could see. They were shining lights back there and said you could see the trailer shaking, and then it was over in a minute. 60 seconds, everything stopped. And so that kind of confirms that what Roger mentioned, that the murders were actually over very quick. And that can be referenced in enclosures 1 and 4 for those of you that are following along. Number 3, Roger describes the creature. Now, again, we're covering the common threads from Roger's story that can be verified by the other stories. So number 3, Roger describes the creature. It's more human. Like I said, the thighs were thick, the calves and the feet were kind of weird. They were long and narrow, but they looked like a human foot that was just long and narrow. And this thing the hands were oversized. They'll say that they were bigger, proportion. The body didn't have these long, huge, 8-inch claws or anything like that. I suppose they were, a couple inches at most. And to be honest, that's why I really thought, even years later, to be quite honest, that these were people in suits robbing or trying to murder. And that's what I had thought. As far as how they looked, I told you they looked like very athletic men in a hairy suit. Real thick thighs, big upper body, shorter snout. The ears were more down instead of being clear up on the head. They were more kind of, spaced out a bit. You could see the glimpse that I got that day. You could see the teeth. They weren't, hanging clear out of their head and stuff like that, like people think. Okay, so I'm reading his testimony word for word. That's why it sounds that way. So, now what Roger's describing here is a werewolf, not a dogman. Others have commented on various other creatures which did not even come close to Roger's description. We know it was not a dogman, nor was it Gugway or a Ganosha or a devil monkey or whatever else has come up. It's just not that. And the reference for this is enclosures 1, 4, 5, 10, 13. And if you go to enclosure 8, exhibit S for the type and variant, you'll be surprised at what you see. So that'll be enclosure 8, exhibit S. Federal Agent Johnson reported on 19 November, the creature was coming back, and it came back to that very same tree. It was looking up to see if she, Connie, was still in the tree, but she wasn't because she had been taken down earlier. And that's when my dad took it out, and it was a werewolf. Victor replied, "It was true, Arlene. It was in 1982." And this is him answering a question on 21 March, a year ago. It was one of my dad's cases towards the end of his career. It was a werewolf, and it destroyed that family. It was a wild werewolf that did not have any ear markings. The tree they found the little girl in is the same tree he killed the werewolf in 2 or 3 nights later. So you can reference enclosure 5 for that testimony. Now, Victor described the werewolf on numerous occasions on episodes on Jeff's channel in 2020 as having a body just like a human, except much larger, more resilient, covered in short hair. Nearly all adults are over 7 feet tall and have 2.5-inch claws on very large hands and 1-inch claws on large human-like feet. They have a flat type face with pronounced canine teeth and pointed ears mounted low on the side of the head and does not have a tail. In Jan Thompson's report, she mentions this as well. The claw marks, for instance, on the back of the father's corpse were distinctly made by 4 long claws with a smaller digit, like a thumb on the side. Its span was wider than that of a man's print. These oversized hands match Roger's description. This is also a characteristic of a werewolf, as a werewolf has 4 fingers and an opposable thumb. A dogman has 5 fingers. And you can go and reference enclosure 3 to get more on that. Kuhnbo does not address this description of the creature in his report. Okay, so we just covered 3 common threads. TJ, John, any questions so far?
No,
you're doing it good.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the 4th one. You're going to like this one. This is going to be your favorite.
I don't like it.
Number 4. This is from Roger's report. These gentlemen showed up. Roger's statement. I don't want to say they were FBI because I don't know. And he's stuck to that, even though he's been questioned a bunch of times on that. They're the people that were there, and they had absolutely no identification as far as being FBI or anything like that. But they absolutely were not local police. They were not state police, anything like that. They're the ones that did take me back to the campground, and they're actually quite nice to me. I was taken by 2 men. The one was named Walt. I don't remember the other one. Okay, Victor reported in 19 November. Next morning, early, they started the hunt. My dad and the other agent were there, and they had already found the little girl. Okay, so we know that that's these gentlemen, they're CIA. Okay, so Victor's dad was the other unnamed agent that we know of that was partnered with Walt. Walt has been mentioned by Victor before, and I'm sorry I couldn't find the reference for that, but I knew that name as soon as Roger mentioned it. I heard Victor mention that agent's name before. Nevertheless, we know there were at least 2 agents there, Walt being one, and in Victor's report, his dad being the other. But there may have been more. So, and Jan Thompson, what she reported was after about 7 hours, most of the officers were sent away as a new team of investigators arrived. And they were told not to talk to anyone of the incident, especially not the media. And so, again, this is the third mention of these federal agents showing up at the crime scene. Now, Jan got this from the 2 police officers that came into her restaurant at about 3 a.m. Now, they had been on the crime scene for about 7 hours. And so that kind of puts them, at the crime scene around 7 p.m. if they were there that whole time, something I don't know for sure. We can't verify that at this point. But if they've been there 7 hours and were told to leave by these agents, that would make it around 2 a.m. And so this is one of the areas that needs to be deconflicted, as Roger's arrival time with the agents at the scene is long before that, according to him. So that's something that needs to be some pointed questions to try to untangle that. Kumo mentions in his story the men in black may have showed up, which is slang for federal agents, and so that's referenced in Closure 2. So when constructing a logical timeline, Roger mentions it was almost dark, which would be around 6 p.m. on 7 April 1982. The local weather report has sunset at 6:23. And so you can go and look, reference enclosure 6, 7, and 11 if you're following along. All right, so we've just covered 4 common threads. The last one's a little weak, but it's important nevertheless. Well, it's not the last one, but it's the next one. Roger mentions they were in the last parking area. Now, I assume this means the last area in that particular campsite to park a camper. I assume that's what it means. Jan or Kumbo does not mention this in their account of this at all. Victor read on 19 November from his father's notes. Excuse me.
No excuse.
That's
just unprofessional.
I'm getting dry.
I can't hear you right now. You must be muted. That's just unprofessional.
All right, whatever. Victor mentioned in his report that they were the furthest back in the campground. So we have Victor kind of backing up Roger's reference at this point. So what questions do you guys have so far? Nothing.
I didn't write any down.
You know what?
What's that?
Here's something I saw in the comment section. 1911 Drew made a very profound comment that I think we should point out. Is he said something that what we're doing and all of us who are bringing to light these details about the existence of these creatures and the behaviors and what we know about them, we are actually speaking for those that have been taken in the past, those that have disappeared overnight, those that whose cases have been swept under the rug or covered up, and that was a very awesome comment. I just wanted to give him credit for thinking along that line, and that just justifies what it is that we're trying to do here, as a group, and the importance that surrounds this kind of work, to help us all understand what is actually going on, and how we can protect ourselves and protect our loved ones and our homes, and so we can get further down the road until we fully understand what is going on in this world of ours and what we're actually dealing with. Because I honestly believe that there's a hell of a lot more going on in the cryptid world than just the big 3 that we've talked about.
Oh, yeah. No doubt, but I can't boil the ocean tonight, guys. This just you could go on for days about a lot of this stuff, and it's just
Yeah, we can't cover it all. We're just trying to make a dent and talk about the subject and maybe fill in some details. Another really good point that a couple of the listeners have brought up is that in Roger's description, he also talked about the ears were not high up on the head, were much lower on the head, on the sides. So that also gives that also fits the description more of a werewolf type creature if you're going off of Victor's information on that side. And I can say this: I still don't, not claiming that Victor's 100% credible or not, but we have been able to bring up some cases where we would say we definitely have reason to believe that he could be a credible person. And that's why we're using some of his testimony in the LBL story in light of that. However, so that's why we're bringing that up. And there was something else I was going to say, and I'm completely forgetting what it was. So I'm just going to shut up now. Y'all play host.
Okay, so hey, there was a couple comments. I know Carol asked what I was reading from. Well, I was reading the stuff that I was sharing with you guys, which you can have access to the shared drive and pull all this stuff down and follow along if you like. So send an email to saxonwarlord2@gmail.com, as I put in the comments, and just provide your name and email address, and I'll punch you in, and you can have access to the shared drive where this is being held. I hate to do it that way. I couldn't, the security wouldn't let me open it up to the whole world to download it. I tried that and it didn't work. The link didn't work. So anyway, I'm happy to give you guys all the reference material and research I've done so that you can follow along and, do your own thing if you want. Contribute, tell me where I'm wrong or help.
Yeah, because the idea is it's a collaborative effort. So,
Yes.
and we want input from all points of view. And I'm not willing to say that a person's not credible just because somebody comes on and says, "Oh, that person's trash and we shouldn't listen to them." No, I don't think people should be discounted that fast. And especially if you haven't done real, research on the subject. So I think that's important. And I remember what I was going to say earlier. I have listened to many people's testimony about their eyewitness encounters, and they specifically, on multiple occasions with multiple eyewitnesses, have described what would be a dogman type cryptid, and then specifically, and many times the same person has a description of a cryptid that it comes across as a werewolf, just as Victor's description of them. And these are people that aren't familiar with Victor or Jeff's show, to the best of my knowledge, on those subjects when I've talked to them on that. And that's a common theme that most witnesses talk about. I can't go into all these, type 1, type 2, it's a type 3-4.5, right? It had 3 hands sticking out of its left nostril, I don't buy into the whole type thing. It was a type 2, it was a type 6, it was a type 4.5-3. I don't get into all that. So when I came across the LBL story, and this was early on when I started doing any kind of research or investigation into this stuff. So unfortunately, I don't have source material from when I first got into this stuff. I started trying to be more accurate with that as I went on later, so I could reference where I got information from, or collating data, so to speak. But I heard from testimony of 2 people that claimed that they were law enforcement that were on the scene on the night of the attack, and then a third person that claimed that they were a wildlife fisheries agent or something to that, forestry service or something to that effect. So, and they talked about how the story got out into the local town. Yeah, we can't see that.
Yeah, never mind.
But they also talked about how the story got out to the local town and the diner through family connections that they had, and that's been verified. So I I believe the stories I heard, but I can't say 100% if these people were actual police officers that were there that night. I just know that they claimed to be when the story had gone down. But it was terrifying nonetheless. We know that something did take place there, and we know it was horrific. Now, the exact details of how it went down, that's still really up for debate and discussion. But it is very interesting with Roger coming forward to try to give his testimony. And there's been a lot of talk. There's been a lot of talk on Roger. A lot of people are on one side of the fence that Roger, why, he hasn't come forward and since 1981 all the way until now, that can't be credible kind of idea. And then others say, no, a lot of what he says makes sense or collaborates other stories. So, and there's a lot of shows right now talking about that. Roger, I think himself has been playing the circuit and going on different channels to be interviewed on the subject. So, let me ask you, Hunter, what are your thoughts on given everything that you know on the subject and, comparing different stories of different witnesses or leaders in this cryptid field or whatever? What do you think about Roger as far as that?
I think he's credible. And to be honest with you, I don't think he should be treated any less than the other people that have written about this. I mean, I don't think he's any less credible than Kumbo, any less credible than Victor, any less credible than Jan Thompson. I mean, they're not here to defend themselves, so I'm putting him on equal footing with them at this point until there's a time that I wouldn't want to do that. And right now I'm not at that time because there's no evidence to support that he's lying. So it's he comes across as, and he's been very consistent in his messaging. He's been very detailed in some of the stuff that he's experienced. And it does match up with other reports. In particular, it matches up a lot with what Victor put out. And he wouldn't know Victor from Adam. And Victor's not telling everything about the LBL, obviously, because he's restricted on what he can put out. And there's a little bit of misinformation I think he's stuck in there too, which we'll see in the timeline. His timeline is about a 4-hour difference than everybody else's. And I think that was purposely done. As when he first came on the scene, he kind of told us that he couldn't always talk about places and times and events all at the same time. In other words, he's able to put out information. He's just not able to prove anything. So with his organization, it's not what people talk about. It's what that can be proven. That'll be the same with any of us. Yeah, you can talk about that stuff, but as long as you can't prove it, that's all we care about.
And something people are bringing up in the chat room is the fact that Roger stated that the little girl was found on the grounds next to the camper, whereas many of the other stories talk about the girl being found in the tree. So that's certainly something to discuss.
Yeah, so I don't recall Roger ever saying that. As a matter of fact, when asked the question, he couldn't really answer it. So I don't know if he knows, and that's actually one of the questions I would have for him if I were, interviewing him is, where was the girl found? Do you know? If you do know, how do you know? Did you see her? Did someone tell you? Did you see a picture? And that location, how close was that to the camper? Was it close or was it further away? And so there's a lot of questions with relate to time and distance and the questions I have for him.
When I listened to Roger's story, he said that it was absolutely absurd about the girl being found in the tree. He said that she was I believe he was, if I remember correctly, and it's been a little while, he said that her and the mother were found on the side of the camper, on the outside of the camper. Some say inside of the camper. I believe he said outside of the camper, if I'm correct on that. but he had said he made an issue about it was absurd about this completely made up story about her being in the tree. Although that's the biggest account. Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, that's like one of the questions is why is that absurd?
Right.
And I think from his experience, they took him back, as he said, to see the creature in the tree. Now, he sees the creature in the tree, and he still thinks that creature died in the tree from a non-lethal gunshot wound from a 20 gauge shotgun and a 410 shotgun, which, you know, that's kind of absurd, because if anyone that's been following, you know, any of these creatures, they don't hardly flinch when they get hit with a high-powered rifle. And so, you know, getting hit with a 410 and a 20 gauge is probably going to cause a little itch. You know, that's about it. So that's non-lethal. Two non-lethal gunshot wounds, of which he admitted that the part of the 20 gauge, unfortunately, that particular shot hit Stephen as well. So you didn't even get the full force of a 20 gauge on this creature before it was on Levi, and he became the second victim in this tragedy. But so he doesn't know that the agents actually hunted this thing in his absence and killed it, and they brought him back to correctly identify the creature. That's what I think happened. If you get into Victor's report, matter of fact, every time he's talked about the LBL, his dad shot this thing in the tree. His dad had to climb the tree and cut a limb to get the werewolf out of the tree. He hunted this thing, and they killed the family. So, and it was a wild one. It wasn't even from the breeding program. So he's been very consistent on messaging the creature with regard to the LBL that killed the family. Now, what Roger also says, so Roger doesn't know that this hunt occurred. He's oblivious to a whole bunch of things he wasn't exposed to, and that's okay. Eventually he might discover it, or he'll hear some of these things and think, wow, I didn't know that. So I think Roger has some blind spots he's not aware of because he wasn't there for the entire process. You know, he left the crime scene, was picked up by the farmer, went to his house. Agents picked him up in a couple hours or whatnot, took him back, went over the crime scene with him, tell us what happened. He described that. And then we don't know what happened, how long he stayed there before he left, because he does mention going to this 2-stall, you know, cement block building in a town that starts with an H, which we thought was Hopkinsville. And so he hung out there for a while. Then eventually he had to come back and identify the creature. We assume it was dark because they put lights on the creature. And so that doesn't quite line up with Victor's story. Victor's story starts early morning on the 8th. My dad and one other agent were on the hunt. And as they went back to that tree, figuring that might be their starting point, because they know that the creature was in the tree, because they found the body of the girl in the tree. So as they're there and then making their way back, and they thought they would start the hunt later, they caught movement out of the corner of their eye. And they look across this opening, this like meadow, and they see this creature. And so they duck down and they wait, and sure enough, this creature just comes walking right up to the tree, looks up at the tree and finds that, you know, the girl's not there, climbs the tree, and his dad shoots the creature. It gets stuck on the tree. He has to climb the tree and cut the limb to get the creature out. Now, when I'm thinking through Victor's story, it sounds like daylight. It does not sound like it's dark. And so Roger says that he saw the creature in the tree dead, and they shined lights on it. Well, if it was daytime, you wouldn't have to shine lights on it. So, I mean, so there's some conflicts right there a little bit between when Roger saw the creature and when Victor said the hunt occurred. Now, yeah, they could have started the hunt in the dark, because I think sunrise was at 5:35 that morning, the 8th. I have that on my timeline as well. So they could have started before that, but now we get into, well, you went up to the tree, and then as you were leaving, you saw something out of the corner of your eye, and you decided to duck down, and sure enough, it was the creature returning to the tree. Well, that sounds like it's daylight. It doesn't sound like it's dark unless you were wearing, night vision. And I'm not sure if they had night vision in 1982 for agents to, hunt. So there's a lot of unknowns with that. And so that's another time conflict that needs to be deconflicted. So I do believe that Victor's dad or another agent, killed the creature. I don't think the creature died as a result of Levi and Roger's, shotgun injuries. That would be fairly close to impossible, I think. As those shots wouldn't have been lethal, not with bird shot, as he claimed. It probably was. So Stephen Riley, I've shot squirrels with 410 that got away. Me too, Steve. I used to have a 410 growing up. So, but that's one of the things that I have identified in here. And so the next thing we have, so now we're up to number 6, and these are the common threads. Okay, Roger claims the attack occurred around dusk. Okay, so we know that sundown or sunset was at 6:23. That's in my weather report that I have. We know that there was a full moon, and the full moon was visible right after that. That's also in my one of my.
And we all know about werewolves and the full moon, right?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
So as Victor has claimed, they do get a little more excited during a full moon. So Victor's report is the only. Yeah. So Victor's report that is the only report that differs on the times based on the witness reports and events that he described in his report. So everyone says it's happened around dusk. Jan Thompson, I think, mentions that. Kumbo does it. Now, Victor says that these events happen between 10:30 p.m. and 12 o'clock a.m. All the other reports, indicate right at dusk. And so there's about a 4-hour difference there. And I think that, I'm going to stick with the dusk story because that's the prevailing one as I'm thinking how I'll do this. And I think that Victor may have changed the times just as he couldn't reveal the exact times. And he did mention that he wasn't even cleared to reveal the names of the victims at this time. So Jan Thompson account claimed the 2 officers were on site for over 8 hours when she saw them at 3 a.m. So that would put them on or about the crime scene at 7 p.m. right after it got dark. And so if it's a crime scene at 7 p.m., that means that the crime happened before 7 p.m., which would have put it closer to dusk or, before sunset. And Kumbo, of course, he also claimed that this happened around dusk. So those are some of the common threads that can be verified, between Roger's story and the others. Now, there's probably more than that, but those are the big ones that stuck out for me that I got a hold of. So, and let me see. All right, so we have some other people that need access. So, TJ, any questions or comments, or John?
Yeah, TJ, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you have anything to say?
I'm enjoying this. In my mind of many minds, I have this story in a box, basically. Family went camping, beast crawled out of the woods, killed the family. A lot of details, were swept under, the carpet. The whole story never really came out in the open with all the details, with a warning to people, be careful. Yes, we were able to confirm that this is most likely a werewolf type creature. It was one singular, could have been 2, doesn't really matter. The creature was later killed, and we have to learn as much from this particular case as we possibly can at this point in time. But in my mind, I pretty much have it in a box, and it's like, okay, got it. But what bothers me is what other cases exist out there. And since we're talking to LBL, they exist in the LBL. What other killings have gone on out there that have been kept from us, have been swept under the rug, in addition to this case alone? And that's what bothers me, and that's what I want to know about. And because obviously the authorities, the government is going at great lengths to keep a cap on this thing, and a lot of money is being spent because we actually have people actively handling these cases and moving people around and manipulating the media and hunting these creatures. And we got aircraft coming in and vehicles rolling in and out and teams coming in out of nowhere, the Men in Black or what have you. And it's kind of crazy if you think about it. So there's a huge containment effort going on regarding these cases. And that's what I want to know more about. And we discover these things in doing exactly what we're doing now. And I would truly love if more people would come forward with what they know, what they've experienced, what they've heard, what they've seen, and we just continue to share more and more information with each other, because that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
So you're not going to get that from the media. You're not going to get that from any government agency, whether it's local or federal. And you're not going to get that from scientists. You're on your own. And the only and we're back to where you just said, TJ, we have to share it amongst ourselves. And so, hey, I'm putting everything out there just related to this case that I hopefully will end up in a book, but this is where I am so far. So I welcome any folks that got any comments or theories, or if there's any material or that I've left out, by all means.
Right.
So I just let a whole bunch of people into the shared drive. So if you requested access, please verify that you got it and you have access to everything. If you didn't, I can redo it, I guess. So but let's get back to. Go ahead.
Just one more comment, real quick, Hunter and John. I saw what I identified as a werewolf creature up in New Mexico back in 2007. And that's the only encounter that I had. And I saw it from about 400 yards through binoculars. And that was enough to shake my world, because I thought it was a big bear at first. And then I said, oh my gosh, this is a big Sasquatch, until it stood up and looked at me. And it was like, oh no, this is something completely different. And I couldn't talk about that to anybody. Everybody back then, okay, yeah, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, what have you. They were more open to discussing that. Yeah, you saw one, well, good for you. But I could not talk about, this other bipedal cryptid creature. And then in 2014 is when I saw my first Dogman creature. And it was actually a small pack of 3. And that was across the field about 200 yards away. And I was looking at them through binoculars. I actually tracked them. I found tracks down by a creek and followed them for about 1.5 miles, 2 miles through the swamp to get to a point to where I was just at the edge of a tree line looking across the field, and they're on the other side of the field sitting there looking at me like they knew I was coming. And that's when I said, oh, okay, time to go. But and those stories will be shared in my new book. But up until 2019, you couldn't talk about those other 2 critters,
Right. Absolutely. And TJ, you brought about other cases that have taken place in the LBL, and that's certainly worth bringing up and talking about. And one of the viewers, Kristen, asked to go into one of those stories and one of those encounters. And that was Jody Cook with North American Dogman Project, to his credit, put out a video that I ordered and have a copy of, and it was fantastic. And it was a wildlife and fisheries agent or forestry agent that worked in the LBL. And he was on his day off and was fishing on a boat offshore. And in the middle of the daytime, when he said at first he saw this creature look like a horse to him, just like when you saw that werewolf. The first thing you thought was it's a bear, because your mind tries to assimilate and adjust for what you're seeing. And this man said he thought what looked like a horse was approaching this tent where some campers were camping. And then all of a sudden he says the thing stands up on two legs. And he realizes, okay, this isn't normal. This isn't natural. What the hell is that? But the thing seems like it's stalking and slowly approaching the tent. So the forestry agent starts yelling to these campers, and two campers come out, a young man and a young woman. They hear the commotion, they hear the yelling, they come out of the tent to try to see what's going on in the commotion. And the forestry agent's in the boat offshore, waving his hands and jumping up and down and screaming. And they wave back. They don't understand that he's too far away for them to hear what it is he's trying to say. And he's trying to point over to this thing that's still approaching them. And the next thing you know, he says this thing jumps on top of both of them and slaughters them both instantly in the middle of the broad daylight. And this guy said he was so freaked out by this encounter that he actually passed out. He lost consciousness. And he woke up in the boats that had gone into some sort of bay further miles down the river, where it got caught up in some little bay. And he woke up there, and he said he realized he had peed all over himself, and was completely in shock and shaken over what he witnessed. And he debated, should he go public? Should he report this? And he said he came to the conclusion that if this thing is real, then the higher ups know about it. And he was afraid, if I put this out or try to make a report about it, he was like, I'm afraid for reprisal for my job, which I'm dependent on for a salary to feed me and my family, or even a reprisal against my family. So he decided that he was going to shut up about it and not tell anybody what he saw. Well, years go by, and he said he was new on the job, about 2 years on the job, and still felt like he was a rookie at the time. But years go by, like 20 years go by, and he's now an older person who's retired, and he has cancer, and he's on his deathbed. And he says that before he can meet his maker in death and go to a judgment or whatever his belief system was, he said he felt like he had to get this thing off of his chest that he's held secret for so many years, because he felt very guilty for not reporting this young couple being slaughtered in the middle of the broad daylight in the LBL. And so he finally decided to do a deathbed confession to reveal this. And sure enough, 2 weeks after doing the video, he died of his cancer. So that was another. And I can tell you this too. I've spoken to military contractors that have had lots of experience with dogmen, werewolves, or whatever. They don't make a distinction. They just know there's different kinds of creatures they saw. Maybe it was a -2.47.1, but he said, I've had military contractors tell me there are parts of the LBL that if you go in there, you're not coming out alive. And they highly stress to me not to go playing around in there, because there are parts of that place that they said you will not come back from. So that's what I heard. I'm sticking to it. Anyway, so someone wanted to share that story, so I thought I'd throw that out there since we were discussing other incidences in the LBL. Hunter, what do you have to say? Are you silent? I didn't think that was humanly possible.
Whatever. Anyway, so John and Kristen, so that is actually mentioned in reference number 5, enclosure number 5. Somebody asked Victor that very same question, and I think his response was, I think this happened in 79. And he looked in his files. He goes, well, 79 was kind of a light year for us. We only had 9 incidents in the LBL, and that was not one of them. So there's probably a chance that this happened, and no, it was covered up. It was covered up, and
Right.
and like Victor's guys were not even involved. So, but Brant brings up a good point. Brant Douglas. I was wondering how Victor's dad got there from Virginia so fast. Even flying, it takes a few hours. So, Brant, I do cover that in my analysis, and that's going to be, I think, enclosure 8 probably. So, yeah, their base is in Southern Virginia, and I want to say driving was 11 hours and 35 minutes, and flying was 3.5 hours. And listening to Roger's testimony, I believe these guys were already in town for something else. Because, yes, you're right. They were able to get there very fast. And that would lead me to believe that they didn't come from Virginia. They were already on site. They were in the vicinity already for something else. And I don't think they were alone. I think that they had other agents with them. And I think those might be the people that Roger saw at the crime scene that he couldn't identify as anyone else. They didn't look like policemen, but they kind of had camouflage or military style uniforms, but they didn't have any markings. Okay, that's Latin for, the agency. And so I stick that in one of my enclosures as well that talks about the uniforms. Did the uniforms look like this? Did the vehicles look like this? Now, granted, we're talking 1982. The BDU, the battle dress uniform, the camouflage uniform came out in October of 81, and then it was only issued to general officers and base commanders. Now, that was October of 81. In November of 81, they started issuing out to the active duty Army. And, this came in phases. You didn't have enough to, get them all the same day. And in some cases, they were issued, and then depending on what your rank was, you had to buy them. And then you had to hope for your size. So it took a little while for that to get out. And so since this event happened in April of 1982, now you're talking, within 6 months of the initial issue to the active duty forces. Well, in 1982, the reserve forces were, you got a lot of hand-me-downs. They weren't the first to get, like new uniforms. And they wouldn't have been the priority for that. So my hypothesis is that the Kentucky National Guard, as it were, didn't have camouflage uniforms yet. Now, that's a speculation. I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you from the time and the trends, I got mine issued to me. I don't think I even got them issued to me in 81. I think that I didn't get mine till like maybe January, February of 82. And I was on active duty at the time. I was in the Army Honor Guard at the time at Fort Myer, Virginia. So they like to kind of give us all that new kind of stuff soon. I was still wearing the green uniform. So, and you'll see that in one of the enclosures. So, hey, it's good point, Brant. And hey, I'm happy you pointed that out. I was going to get to that, and I'm surprised that somebody beat me to it. So very good, very good. So let me jump back in here a minute. And
okay, one thing real quick, since you brought up the BDUs, you talked about the night vision. If I am correct, they developed the night vision during Vietnam. Now, it wasn't something that was issued out to the troops like it is today, but they did have the technology starting and testing in phases back then in Vietnam. So if anyone would have had access to that technology, it would have been our higher intelligence agencies in the 80s, even though it wasn't common to the public or the military at that time.
Now,
that would be my.
I'm not an expert on that part of it. I do know that, yes, you're right. The Starlight scope was in use in Vietnam, and that's what I actually had to use in the early 80s when I was an infantryman. So I don't recall us having goggles at the time or seeing goggles anywhere. But the Starlight scope is what I was issued. And yeah, everything came in shades of green. It wasn't, you're almost better off without the damn thing. So,
and I had the PVS 7s, which is still, I think, is still one of the most number one used even to this day, even though they've got more generations now and fancier stuff.
Okay. All right. So let me see. So here's some things to deconflict. Tyler's story is, the pre-attack phase is not mentioned by the other sources. He's the only one present for that. So, okay. And that seemed plausible. I did a map quest and backtracked, his timeline from, LaGrange, Indiana, coming down to the LBL, and all that fit, pretty nice and neat. He claims that there was more than one creature, yet he only confirms seeing one creature. And all the other reports only indicate one creature. Now, I do have some thoughts on that. I personally think it was probably one creature. I think that when Roger had his encounter with it and it ran away, it didn't run far and turned around and ran back and came in the back window, doing what he thought a second creature was doing. I think it was the same creature. And I know that he didn't know about these creatures, but they are lightning fast. I mean, if anything that Victor has told us and what you guys have witnessed, I mean, they clocked a werewolf running on 2 legs at 48 miles an hour. I mean, that's a lot faster than a human can run. And their agility is off the rails. So
it's faster than the eye can even comprehend at top speed. I mean, it's like that. Like, okay, something went across my eyes, but I can't make out what in the heck it was. And there was even video online on YouTube for a while of these creatures that were really good running through backyards where people had recorded them. It was like, what the heck is this? And then there's one that runs so fast you just see, but then all of a sudden it stops and stands up and walks off. Now that video has been removed and I've never been able to find it again. There were 2 of them, in fact, that were running that fast and both came to a dead stop, stood up, and then walked off. And you could just barely make it out because they were in a distance in the wood line behind this woman's house, and she was recording it on her phone and was like, what the heck is this? You know what I mean? And but that's been removed because I have not been able to find that footage in a very long time. But it was great footage. And then even on DogmanCams.com, we have Blue in Florida on one of our cameras. That's just of his backyard, because just like one of the listeners just said in the chat room, he went outside to smoke a cigarette on his back porch and saw these things running across the back of his property or sitting there staring at him on the property. And he took photographs of them and filmed them on his phone. And you can find that footage if you go to Florida Fort Pierce Dogman. Just type that into YouTube. Fort Pierce, Florida Dogman. And you'll see that video. And they have to slow down the video frame by frame so you can finally make out what this thing is going by. And even then, in the dark, with the light from a light pole, it almost looks like a ghost going by. But you can clearly make out the shape of a dog man. And that's why we stuck a camera there. That, and because there's evidence to suggest that they repeat their migration patterns. So it's a good chance that it'll run by there again. And hopefully so, then we hope to catch it. So, but you were saying, Hunter?
I was saying I'm waiting for TJ to pipe up. He's been kind of quiet. And so.
No, I'm enjoying, I mean, I love the comment section is just on fire, isn't it, John?
Oh yeah, we've got a great audience for sure.
We do, and I can tell you there is an effort ongoing. There is a team that gets online, goes on YouTube. They are screening. They're looking for evidence, for content, people posting videos, etc. And it's like what we discussed already. I mean, the authorities don't care about what you have to say. They only care about what you can prove. And you can't prove anything unless you have evidence. And I tell you what, I accidentally saw a video and I have not found it since. I went back to it when I realized what it was that I had been looking at. somebody had videotaped a werewolf that had stepped into a bush and was standing there watching him, staring at him, and it thought it was completely obscured and blending in with the bush. And it was, until the guy with the camera zoomed in on it, and you could see the details in its face, its eyes, everything. Did you guys, any of you guys see that video?
I've never seen that, but what strikes me,
it blew my mind. I think I mentioned it to you, Hunter, and I tried to find it again, and it was gone.
What I think is hilarious is you see all these photographs of dogmen standing behind a tree, you know, this big, and they think that they're like camouflaged because they're behind this tree, and they've got this giant silhouette of a body sticking out around that tree, but they're like, hey, as long as I'm behind this little stick, no one can see me, you know? I mean, they do blend very well in the bushes, but it's hilarious how those be standing in a broad daylight, and it's like, yeah, I'm behind this pole, and it's like, man, you can make out the whole body standing behind the pole. Why are you hiding behind the pole? You know, and that's hilarious to me. But yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence. You want to cut back in?
Yeah. I said, before I jump back in, Kristen Doschel brings up a good point. And she's talking about part of Roger's story. And she said how it's weird how Roger said the one creature was hitting his head and doing a strange dance as he ran off. Okay, so what I think that is when Roger shot him with the shotgun, he probably had some buckshot that strayed above his shoulder into his head, neck region. And he was shaking, bumping his head as if he was trying to dislodge it, or, you know, he was reacting to that shot. And that's why he may have been, you know, dancing a little bit as he was running away. That's what I drew from that. So that's I just want Kristen to know that, yeah, that's when I heard that, I was thinking, well, why would it do that? Well, he just got shot, and he's probably, you know, thinking if he hits his head that the buckshot will fall out or something. I don't know, or his ears probably, because the ears are mounted low on the head for a werewolf. So. Yeah, so Tyler claims that Connie's body was not found in the tree, but he offers up no explanation of how he knows this or where she was found, nor was he present at the crime scene the entire time. All the other reports indicate her body was found in the tree. And so that's one of those things that, you just need to ask Roger the right questions to find out, you know, because he's got some blind spots, but I don't think he knows he has blind spots. And the other interviews I've listened to haven't, you know, brought that out. So, you know, and Jan Thompson talks about it, that, you know, the police officers from the tree and blood dripped down. Victor mentioned the same thing about his dad and the agent, the blood dripped down. Kuhnbo mentions it, you know, that all of them mentioned that her body was found in the tree. So, and I go into, and we talk a little bit, we've already discussed this, but about the uniforms and the people that were there. And after thinking about this, I really think it was all people from Victor's agency that were there. It was the whole team. It was Walt plus Victor's dad and probably several other agents that were all down there at the same time, you know, doing something that wasn't related to this. So as far as the military being there, I don't think the military was there. I couldn't find any evidence of that. You know, Victor and Jan did not mention it. Even when Roger mentioned it, he thought it might be National Guard, but they weren't wearing any unit patches or name tags. You know, Kuhnbo goes into, you know, at great length discussing this. You know, and so he says, you know, a lot of special forces troops came in from Fort Campbell. Yeah, I couldn't find any evidence to support that claim. And discussing this incident with a friend of mine that's a general officer who happened to be a close friend of mine, and he commanded at Fort Campbell, which happens to be the largest military base that's close to the LBL. He indicated that such a request, you know, for forces for manpower. We have to go through official DoD channels and then come down through Forces Commander, FORSCOM, who would then direct the appropriate Army unit to support this request by coordinating with the U.S. Park Service. And that's who owns the LBL. So that case would not be handled locally with like active duty, military assets. The largest active duty unit that could respond to that would be the 101st Airborne Division. Now, it just so happens that the 101st, they wouldn't be used to find a local missing persons case or to hunt down some mystery wild animal. During that particular period, they had to maintain at least one battalion as a division ready force for rapid deployment anywhere in the world on a very short notice. Yeah.
24 hours notice.
So what does that mean for you guys in our military? It means that you got a battalion, which is going to be 450 to 600 troops sitting on the tarmac with their bags ready to go. So if somebody says, hey, we need you to go to Egypt, the plane's going to land, you're going to load up and you're going to go to war. Or you're going to go to that problem. And so the 101st maintains that. The 82nd Airborne maintains that. 10th
Ranger Battalion as well. Ranger Battalion.
Yeah, so Ranger Battalions. So all these have, and it rotates. So like one battalion will be on alert this week, and they'll be hanging out at the airport the whole week. And while another battalion is doing like training week, so they're doing training. Another one will have detail week where they'll be helping out with stuff on base that needs to be fixed and moved and whatnot. So it kind of goes like that. So the 101st, they got this one battalion, this division ready force for rapid deployment. Okay. In addition to that, they're supporting other joint and multinational missions throughout the world. So for example, they were part of the multinational peacekeeping force in Egypt. We have an ongoing, it's called Task Force Egypt, I think is what we call it. I supported them when I was in theater last, which was a couple of years ago. So, but there's basically some observers along the border between the Sinai and Egypt and Israel. And so they supported this back in the day. They don't do it anymore. It's mostly National Guard and Reserve units that support this, that rotate in. So my friend, this general officer who is probably getting ready to look at a third star in a minute, he wanted to state that local emergencies would also be run through the governor, and he could deploy, Kentucky National Guard units for a mission like this. So in 1982, there were no special forces units stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It wasn't until the summer of 1988 that the 5th Special Forces Group relocated from Fort Bragg, North Carolina to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So that happened 6 years after this event. So there weren't any Special Forces units on Fort Campbell that were going to run to the LBL and go look for a missing person or hunt down a mystery animal. So I just want to make sure we put that rumor to rest. And
not only that, standard SOP from other situations like that would be the governor activates the Army National Guard.
Yeah. So let me get into the rest of this, and you'll find out why that probably didn't happen. So the Kentucky Army National Guard, has maintained a strength of about 6,000 soldiers for years and years and years. And they could easily fulfill such a request, if they got it. I couldn't find any deployment lists for 1982. That doesn't mean there weren't any. I couldn't find them. They weren't being posted in any of the unclassed areas that I had access to. Now this is only relevant because there's been stories floating around that there were lots of troops that showed up down there to find this missing girl or hunt down this mystery creature, right? So, and one of those things was, one of those stories is the military was called in to establish a skirmish line, basically elbow to elbow across the LBL. So across the LBL, what does that mean? Okay, so that means the land between the lakes is the land between the bank of the Kentucky River on the western side and the bank of the Barkley or Lake Barkley on the eastern side. So the space between those two banks is about 7 miles. That's a lot of terrain to cover for a skirmish line that's elbow to elbow. And so while that's the story that has prevailed about the military's involvement here, I don't think that's practical. If you're going to put armed men in a skirmish line, you definitely don't want them that close, or you end up with fratricide. You have guys that accidentally shoot each other. That's what that means. So the LBL is 7+ miles across, and it is, almost 40 miles long. It starts in the northern part of western Kentucky and goes down to the northern part of western Tennessee. So it does cross boundaries. The part we're talking about is in the north, the very north of the LBL. And so if you put these guys stretched out across the LBL, 7 miles, I mean, I don't know how many people would take. If I were told to do this, I would probably put them at 20-foot intervals. And at 20-foot intervals, that's 1,980 troops. That's a lot of people. And that doesn't count with the logistics to get them there. Now, the reason I would space them at 20 feet is they're armed. So they're close enough that they can support each other in a local emergency, but not so close that they get into a gunfight with something that they have to worry about, hitting each other. And so I thought that would be a safe interval, a 20-foot interval, and that's still 1,980 troops to find a mystery creature or a missing girl. I don't see that happening, but
plus the logistics timeline for a National Guard unit to be able to deploy to such an area.
I'm glad you went there, John, because you're
Yes.
moving ahead. Okay.
So
Hunter,
in my mind, that order never would have gone out, knowing what we know. The first responders, the local authorities show up. Boom, black men in black show up. They take control of the situation. The local authorities are dismissed. Okay, you're out of here. We got it.
Yeah.
That order to do what you just described, it would have never gone out, knowing how Victor's dad's team would be operating back in that time. Like, okay, we saw the victims. We know what the creature is. We know how we're going to hunt it down. Boom, it's gone in 2 days, in 48 hours, right? I mean, why would they stand up a freaking division or a brigade to go do this, Well,
so I'm illustrating why that wouldn't happen, because I couldn't find evidence to support this, and I just thought that it was so improbable. So I can't say for sure, right? But I think it's highly unlikely to execute a mission of this magnitude in order to find a missing person or hunt down some mystery creature. It would be unprecedented. And the expense alone, I mean, they'd have to explain that. That would come under scrutiny. Not to mention, this particular agency that hunts cryptids, they do not like getting help from other people. If they want help, they will ask for it. Otherwise, that's more people they got to silence, So, and for one creature, they do one-on-one a lot. So it's not like they would need 1,900 people to track down something. Not to mention these murders happened on a Wednesday. National Guard members are still at their civilian jobs. They're at work. You can't just yank them out like that on the same day, So it would have taken a few days for some of them to get mustered up anyway. So now if it was on a drill weekend, it'd be real easy to put them on trucks and take them over there and see what's what. But in the middle of the week, no, they have jobs they're at. You can't just call them away like that.
I just want to confirm that part of your analysis is I don't think that order ever went out.
I agree, but I couldn't find any evidence of it, and it doesn't meet the MO that the way the CIA works.
I say it's very improbable.
So and then he went on to mention that the Kentucky Lake and the Barkley Lakes were full of boats trying to block the creature from escaping via swimming across either lake. Well, he didn't mention whose boats they were, and I can tell you they're not the Army's, because the Army couldn't get their boats there fast enough. And they do have some small boats that they can truck in, but I don't think they were notified to do this. So if you're talking civilian boats, okay, so you're putting civilian boats on 2 stretches of water that are 37 miles in length. How many boats is it going to take to secure 37 miles of shoreline times 2? So that's another thing that seems, highly improbable. So I think his sources may have been referring to other events that might have gotten lumped into, this particular event in 1982. I mean, I don't see that being, part of this. And we get to another important part. Roger arrives at the campground. Now, he wasn't paying attention when he arrived. He was playing board games and card games. So he really was occupied, with the other kids, having fun. And he wasn't aware of his surroundings until they went to back into their parking spot. So he never noticed if there's any other campers around. He said that there weren't, but what we don't know, because in Victor's report, he mentions that there's 2 families close by. Now, we don't know what close by means. So in the same campsite, in an adjacent campsite, and the campsite across the road, nevertheless, Victor says that. Roger says he didn't see anymore. So I'm not sure how far he was able to see or look to determine that. So again, those are some questions need to be answered on that. And also they mentioned that when they stopped, they disconnected the vehicle they had towed with them, a Chevette, and then backed into their parking spot, and that the camper had self-levelers. Well, no other report mentions a second vehicle at all. And not that that's a big deal, but it would have been nice to have some corroboration from another report. But that's really not a deal breaker. But he just said the camper had self-levelers. Well, no one mentioned self-levelers except for Kuhnbo. Kuhnbo claims the camper did not have self-levelers, that the father had to climb underneath to level the camper. And that was when he was attacked. Now, that's according to Kuhnbo's story. It's what his witness, his I guess, employee that was there understood the story to be. So Roger's like, no, it had automatic levelers. It would self-level. We didn't have to get underneath or anything. So there's another little discrepancy there, and that's only worth mentioning because of that. Roger was by Johnny Henderson, and he's from the Cryptid Studies Institute, and keep them in your hearts and prayers. Johnny's wife just passed away, and so him and Elijah are both having a rough time right now. And I had sent them an invite, and not knowing that, and so when I found that out, I didn't expect a response. So just so you guys know. So Johnny asked if the family was wearing lots of perfume or cologne. Well, Roger says that's impossible. The family was Amish. They didn't wear perfume or cologne, or any of that stuff, makeup. So Victor and Jan never mentioned this in their report, but Kuhnbo discusses it in his report. And you got to remember that that time back in the 80s, the fad was, the guys wore their shirts unbuttoned and a lot of gold necklaces and stuff like that, a lot of cologne and crap, and women wore a lot of glitz and stuff and a lot of perfume and stuff. And, this is back the time of Miami Vice, the A-Team and Mr. T, and wearing all that bling and stuff. And so that was the fashion trend of the day back in that time. Now, remember what I said earlier about the fashion trends of the day. Lots of men wore lots of cologne. Women wore lots of perfume. There's evidence that supports the theory that they don't like the smell of strong perfumes and colognes. That is an offensive smell to them. They determined that the thing did come up out of, through tracking and such as that. They determined the thing did come up from the ravine of the river, coming uphill. The natural thermals of that time of day would have been carrying that scent of those people down that holler, down that ravine towards the river. There's a very strong probability that dogman was walking along the shore returning back to his lair or out hunting or whatever and smelled that offensive cologne smell. Okay, so this is what Kumbo mentions in his report. Roger claimed that this perfume cologne theory was impossible, and since this event happened on 7 April 1982, this was before the A-Team first aired on TV on 23 January 1983, almost a year later, and the first episode of Miami Vice did not air until September 1984, so these two shows could not have been the influence for this family's fashion choices. And I couldn't find any reference anywhere, nor did Victor ever mention any offensive smells to the Dogman or the werewolf. And Victor discussed on several occasions their incredible sense of smell. So, that's another thing that I was in one of the reports that, and only in Kumbo's report, that I probably wouldn't include in my final story. Now, Roger was also asked by Elijah Henderson if he could smell the creature, if it kind of had some horrible smell. And Roger replied no. Victor, Kumbo, and Jan do not mention the creature having a smell or foul odor in their reports, although Victor has mentioned on many occasions that the werewolf is a very clean creature and did not smell. Unlike the Dogman and the Bigfoot, which usually do smell. So there's some questions that I came up with after, discussing with you, John, and with TJ, and looking at this. So if I were to ask Roger some questions, what would I ask? Well, could you see if the creature was a male or female? I mean, werewolves don't wear clothes. That shouldn't be a mystery. I already know what it is, so I want to see if he was able to see. Did the agents ever discuss the creature to you or amongst themselves? What else could we have found that you may have heard about the creature? Was the front of the camper, was it oriented north or south, east, or west? Now, that's only relevant because one of the reports claims the direction it was oriented towards, and I really want to see if Roger can verify if that was true. When did you see the creature dead in the tree? How long after the attack were you shown this creature? That evening? Next evening? You mentioned seeing it with lights, so I implied you saw it at night. Do you remember what time of night? How many people do you estimate were at the site viewing it? So these are all important as we're trying to deconflict some of the timelines that happen post-murder. So post-murder, we have a whole kaleidoscope of events mentioned by every one of the reports, and they're not all in sync. And so I would kind of like Roger to the best of his recollection, just say, I think I was there for probably 2 hours, and then we took me back to this place that they were at, and I tried to get some sleep, and then it was still dark. They came back and got me, and I went and viewed the creature, and then they took me back, and about 4 hours later, my uncle picked me up. I kind of need to deconflict some of that stuff and see where I can synchronize the reports in terms of timing. Because I do believe there's important elements that are truthful or plausible, I should say, in all those stories that just need to be deconflicted. And right now, Roger's the only person we could probably ask and get something out of it. So that's why I have some of these questions in there. It's because I'm trying to deconflict or confirm through what Roger recalls, confirmed that passage in another report. Okay, so if he goes back to see the creature, and there were other people there, what makes the composition of those people they were viewing? They look like friends or companions of Walt? Did they look like civilians? Did they look like game wardens? Fish and game people? What? Was it a mix of people? I think they all belong to the same organization. Is the direction I'm leaning towards. From the way Roger describes it, I don't think they belong to anyone else. They would have been the same organization. So they would have all been agents working with the CIA. How far do you estimate the creature in the tree was from the motorhome? Was it within sight of the motorhome? Was it over a mile away? Was it less than a mile away? And so I have some thoughts on that. One, if you're a predator and you just captured something, you're going to want to take it to a place a safe spot where you can have your meal in peace, in other words. And so I personally don't think it was close to where the camper is. I just think that, the creature had already been shot twice, at that camper. So that's a danger area for him. And if he captured the girl, he's going to want to take her away to a place that he thinks is safe. That's what I believe, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Were there any significant landmarks or terrain features around that tree that were close to that tree? That if we went to look for the tree, it was on a hilltop or it was next to a stream or, whatever. Of course, we talked about this already, but he violently defends the notion that Connie's body was not found in the tree. Okay, so how do you know where Connie was found? Did you see her body somewhere? Did they show you a picture? Did they tell you? How do you know these things? So it's a lot of questions like that. So, and the other thing that's weird is they took Roger back to this double stall cinder block kind of building. So that doesn't sound to me like a place where a couple of agents would fly into town and stay. I think they would go to a hotel or a motel. Yet they're in this cinder block double stall building, which makes me think that this is a safe house that the agents use every time they're in and out of town. There was a couple of cots there. So my question is, were there a phone there? Did you see any tarps? Did you see any big black plastic bags? The body bags, which they've used to put cryptids in probably if they're trying to keep them clandestine. And the fact that this is, kind of out of the way in this cinder block building, it kind of gives them a little privacy from what they would be doing if they were bringing cryptids back there, waiting transport, to go back to Virginia, which is the typical MO that Victor shared with us that they would do. So once the creatures are captured, they're usually loaded up in a helicopter, their bodies, and they're taken back for examination. And once pictures have been taken and reports have been filed, then their bodies are incinerated. So those are the questions I have. If I had a chance to talk to Roger, I'd probably bring up and, hey, can you elaborate on this part? And, it doesn't need to be an interrogation at all. It's just, I have no reason to treat him or anyone else disrespectful in that regard. So, but all right. So I'm getting tired of talking and you guys are getting tired of listening. So I want you to talk a minute.
How did you know? Did I give it away? Was it body language? No,
well,
we're coming. We're coming up we're past the 2-hour mark anyway, so it's time to wrap up. TJ, what were you saying before Hunter rudely cut you off?
It would be great, John, if you could get Roger on your show because we have a completely different batch of questions.
Right.
We would like to ask him just to kind of help fill in some more of these blanks and a lot of it answers a lot of the questions that we saw here in your comment section. So I mean that would be a good effort. But I think on his last appearance he said that this deal he has going on is actually going to happen, and I think.
Oh really? Now it's back on again, off again, on again, off again.
That's what I got on that last show he was on, that it's back on again, and so we'll see.
Well,
but it would be great if we could corral him and get him on your show. That'd be great.
I went to the Cryptids Studies Institute channel and I posted on there trying to invite Roger to come on the show, but every time I did, they deleted my my comment asking him to come on the show, and I would go back and repost it because they said he was reading the comment section. So I was trying to invite him. With him seeing that, and again, he continued to not he, but the channel continued to delete my request. So, so don't know why, but they chose to do that. And then he's gone on Josh Turner's show where you're referring to now. And yeah, for a while, for people that don't know, He was talking about doing a television deal, I believe, with the Travel Channel, and if that's right. So they took down his original interview that he did on the Cryptid Studies Institute channel, and for the sake of the television deal, for rights and that kind of stuff. It gets. I worked in Hollywood. It gets really complicated with all that stuff. But so I can understand why they did that. But apparently, I had heard that it fell through, and they put the channel back up, or they put the original interview back up. But if you're saying you heard him say it's back on again, well, that's how Hollywood works. When you try and do a TV show with Hollywood, it is a nightmare of complication. And it constantly goes through, oh, yeah, we're going to do this, to, okay, now it's canceled, to, okay, we're going to do this, and now it's canceled. And it's just how anything ever gets made on television is an absolute, like, miracle how something ever gets, or a movie. I mean, if you knew all the steps and the nightmares that you have to go through, all the work and the hoops and all that you've got to go to make that happen. It's you have to be insane to be in the movie industry. That, speaking of, I do have some news, and that is that I got in touch with a producer / attorney this last week, and I talked to him about some of my ideas for making a film about Dogman, or possibly a television series. And the producer was very interested and wants to go further with talking to me about trying to set this up and talking about making a pitch or raising money for that. But as I just said, you can never hold your breath with that kind of stuff, because I mean, it's possible that it could happen, but it's also possible you can be strung out through the yes/no game for years. So, I know people that are in those situations now. So don't get your hopes up too much. But I've been trying to work behind the scenes on creating a movie or television series on the topic for at least a year now, and this is the closest I've gotten. So, but hopefully, if people put their intentions towards it, maybe we can make it happen. So, but is there anything else that y'all want to say before we close out for this evening? I know my head's spinning.
Yeah, I've given access to a lot of people on the shared drive.
Okay.
So as I get requests, I'll grant you guys access to it. So what John was talking about, and some of the episodes we've referred to, in this case, enclosure number 1 is the transcript from Roger's first interview with the Cryptid Studies Institute. And so I converted all these videos and audio into text, so that if you guys wanted to quickly research something, you can do a word search and you can get right to that passage and check it for yourself. Especially if you're going to be cross-referencing some of the analysis I've done in my analysis document. You can kind of see where these links are. So if you guys, I know we're going to cut out of here in a minute. And John will determine what happens next. I don't know if we need to go through something like this again. I think I probably will.
I don't know if I can handle this again.
So, hey, Hunter, great work.
I'm going to work on what I think the final draft of the story should look like, based on what we know today. And that'll be something that I'll end up sharing with John and TJ for peer review, or anybody else that needs it, for that matter, that can have some experience with this. And then when we get the final draft, then I'll just save it and put it in the book when I get to that part of the book. And if Roger or somebody comes up with some stuff, I can always change or add that part. So, but if you guys need access to the shared drive, make sure you send an email to saxonwarlord2@gmail.com, and you send that email, and I'll make sure you get access to it, and you can download the whole thing. No secrets.
I got a post up about that everyone should be able to see.
Yeah, good.
To refer them to the website. Yeah, and to respond to some of the comments too. From a law enforcement standpoint, I can tell you witnesses are absolutely horrible. I've worked investigations where you have 5 witnesses standing together, and the first thing we do in law enforcement is separate all the witnesses, because one person squawks one thing, and then they all bobblehead say that was it. And it turns out 9 times out of 10, that wasn't even close. All right. I did a hit and run investigation where a man was killed. All right. And all the witnesses, 5 witnesses that were standing there swore I was looking for a white truck with a red hood on it. And all 5 witnesses said that's exactly what they saw. So I went on a statewide manhunt for any truck that was a white truck with a red hood. And you would be amazed how many white trucks with red hoods there were, okay? And this sent me on a giant goose chase. In the end, when I finally we finally located the guy who caused the hit and run. It was a solid gold truck. There was no red. There was no white. It was a solid gold truck. All right. And it's very sadly, we actually found physical evidence of the body in the grill of the truck. So I hope that's not too graphic for people. But we found the person who caused it. But that just gives you an idea about witnesses. But that said, children make fantastic witnesses. Children have a recall where they don't have a filter. And because of that, they're extremely truthful. And for something that's traumatic to a child, they tend to remember that with a sharp acuity. So a lot of times witnesses from children will be your best witnesses. And another thing about humans is we have egos, and humans want to always assert their ego into the witness for their account for some weird reason. But kids make excellent witnesses. Not always, but many times children can be fantastic witnesses just to answer, especially in traumatic events, just to answer some of the people talking in the chat. And yeah, I worked in Hollywood for a couple of years and trained as a movie producer and a screenwriter. And I'm in groups now in Hollywood that I'm working with. I'm trying to see if we can't get something started. But there's lots of people in this field that are trying to do the same thing and have already approached networks for similar things, or have tried to put a movie out. But I'm really hoping that we might be able to get that accomplished at some point, if at all possible, because I think it'd be a lot of fun. And I think the audience, not just from this channel, but of all the cryptid channels, would really enjoy something like that. So, and it would be a compilation. It would either be a television series on different cryptids, or it would be a compilation of different stories to form a film. So, but that's what we're trying to do. Anyway, any last comments from the peanut gallery?
The one question that I get asked the most comes from people who are having all kinds of activity in and around their house. You know, they live out there on the outskirts. They're kind of remote. They got stuff, running across the roof, slapping the side of the house, hollering and screaming, terrorizing the cats and dogs and stuff like that. And I'll tell you straight up, get floodlights that are motion activated and put them on the corners of the house. And the second thing is put up a good security camera system with infrared, and it will keep them away. They do not want to be seen, and they don't want to be caught on camera, and that will keep them at bay, or at least from leaving the woods and coming into your yard. And if you have one that does go beyond that and cross that line, then yeah, you got another issue on your hand, and that has to be addressed differently.
Right. I've heard in several cases from experts that the best way to deal with the situation is to put up very bright lights that are motion censored, and some that are just on all the time. Put them up very high so that they're hard to mess with, or because in a lot of cases people will just have all their lights destroyed. So put them high and make them difficult to access. But that's one of the best things to do. Dogs are another brilliant thing because they are the best early alert warning system to letting you know that there's a predator or something around. But if things continue to escalate, also as witnesses have said, like all of a sudden all the animals in the area disappear, then all of a sudden your own livestock is starting to disappear, and then your pets start disappearing, then they say it's time to pack your bags and get out of Dodge because you're next.
Right. So these three critters that we're talking about mostly, they are standalone, separate and distinct creatures. You can tell them apart. The werewolf variety does not, there's not, mythical transform, from man into beast with the full moon. It doesn't work like that. It exists. The Dogman exists. Strange creatures in and of themselves. Sasquatch is my favorite and has always been the focus of my research. And I just love sharing information. And I got that first book out there to y'all last year, and I'm working on the second one because I had way too much material. And such is life. This is fun. This is one of the best hobbies to be part of, actually.
Right. Right. Yeah, we lost Hunter. Yeah, I think I kicked him out. Yeah, it's fascinating. And look, before we go, and for any of the audience that didn't hear your stories last time, really quickly, can you share some of the encounters that you experienced while you were in the military of coming across these creatures or cryptids?
Well, there was one event where we were doing a 5-day operation at Fort Lewis, Washington, and it was a movement to contact pretty much. And we had a Bigfoot walk right on into our area, and it was pouring down rain, and we were all taking turns keeping watch, and we were suffering from hypothermia and sleep deprivation and everything else. But this thing just strolled right on in and was walking around us and through us, and would stand there and look down on us. And here I am watching this thing for almost an hour in my night vision devices. But I had already experienced this thing multiple times. So I said, oh my goodness, we got a big hairy visitor, and it's not doing any harm. It's not taking weapons. It's not hurting anybody. It's kind of toying with us and seeing what it can get away with. And it was amazing. It was an amazing event. And that was just one of many experiences that our soldiers have when training deep in the triple canopy rainforest in and around Fort Lewis.
Right. I've heard several stories from soldiers, even in Iraq and Afghanistan, of cryptids and these types of creatures that were just terrifying. But I'll save those for another show.
Yeah.
Hunter, you back with us? Or are you hunting for the sound?
He's having technical difficulties.
Right?
Yeah.
You still there? No?
Yes, sir. You hear me?
Okay, yeah. Any closing thoughts you want to say?
Me? Yeah. Hey, thanks to everyone that joined tonight. All of them. Two things. One, manage expectation. Be proof. Okay. If you just be
your connection is timed out. We're not able to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You're having a bad connection.
So I think what he was trying to say is, through sharing this information with each other and doing our best to analyze these situations and try to, put it all together, we help ourselves to manage expectations. Right.
Okay. Well, he just signed off again. Well, we're getting ready to leave anyway. Everybody, I just wanted to say thank you for coming and listening tonight. Please, if you enjoyed the show, hit the like button and share the channel and pass it along to your friends. And any comments or anything to help better the show, please send that to support@dogmancams.com. Also, if you have had any encounters or photographs or anything of that nature, you want to tell your story, please again notify us at support@dogmancams.com. And until next time, we hope to continue to bring you good and entertaining, yet hopefully true, and also sometimes controversial information for your entertainment. And again, disclaimer for naysayers or whatever, I'm no expert. I'm just trying to help get to the truth, and we're not discounting anyone's story. We love Kumbo, and I can't say that Victor's 100% real, but I can say I think there's more to suggest that he is than he's not. And if he was discredited tomorrow, that doesn't take away from my credibility. This is a guessing game and theories. We're not in a courtroom, and I can't present evidence, so we're stuck with trying to deal with what we have for coming to theories on what we think are on the truth as much as we can. And I don't discount anyone else's channel, anyone else's opinion. All right. We can certainly say we think some things are more likely or less likely. And everyone has a right to that. Everyone has a right to their opinion. And just because everyone has a right to opinion doesn't mean all opinions are correct or truthful. So I think it's worth being able to argue and disagree and try to question witnesses or testimony or things of that nature. I think that everyone should be open to that, and we shouldn't be really quick to discard anything, because we're talking about things that are absolutely beyond normal and things that we can't just put a finger on and come to a quick resolution on. So that's just not how this field works. So we've got to be open. And I say this to any other cryptid channels, hey, let's all be inclusive. Let's all work together. We don't have to always agree, and we don't have to have the same opinions to get along and be friends. But there's so much infighting in this business and among these channels that it's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So I say, let's try to all work together to contribute to the community and to our fans, and try to come to knowledge of the best we can. So, TJ?
No, that's great. Thanks, John, for what you do. I really appreciate it, brother.
Y'all have a good night, and see y'all next time. And hopefully we'll have another exciting encounter and more information we can bring to the light, to the surface. Have a good night, everybody. Take care. Until next time.